guys, welcome back to my channel. This is week 2 of us talking about sickle cell disease and the process of my bone marrow transplant. Now, I had my bone marrow transplant back in August 2013, so it's been about like a decade plus now, and that is why I wanted to come back and be real with my fan page and be real with just everyone as to how I'm doing. I mean, obviously I look great, I feel great, thank to God. So we're gonna keep on going, and on this video the topic would be, we're gonna talk about the type of transplant I had, the steps that it required for the transplant, how much time did I take for the transplant. So we're gonna go into all those details, and including as well the side effects of the transplant. Okay, so the bone marrow transplant that I had was called a haploidentical bone marrow transplant. Now, my family and I, we had gone to so many different hospitals, to some even different states, to try to see which type of bone marrow transplant at the time worked best for me. And the reason why we chose this type of bone marrow transplant was because it was the only one in 2013 that offered us that and told us, if you have a sibling, a parent, or a child that was 50% at least, they could be your donor, right? So with the other types of bone marrow transplants, like for instance, the match related donor transplant, like that one required you to have 100% donor match. So that one was more difficult for me because most of the time you don't have 100% donor match unless you have a identical twin. Now, don't get me wrong, there were in some cases, and I'm only able to talk about this one because I actually met a child. He was about 6 years old at the time, and he also had sickle cell. And believe it or not, he was not African. He was not of a like African descent or anything. He was actually Hispanic. So he had a bone marrow transplant himself, but his donor was not from his family. It was actually just a randomly matched donor that they found from a different country for him. So he was able to use that donor to help him. But those instances at the time was actually rare to have. Most of the time you have your donor when you're related, when it's family. So coming back to mine, with that transplant, my brother was my donor. Now, we tried to use my mom, but there was some little, issues here and there. So that's when we ended up using my brother at the time, my only full sibling. Now, let's go more into the details as to what were the requirements of me having a bone marrow transplant. Now, in 2013, they had told me and my family that not everyone with sickle cell qualifies for the bone marrow transplant that I had. Some of the requirements that we were told was that if you had sickle cell disease, you have to be hospitalized in 1 year period at least 3 times or more. And each one of those times that you were hospitalized, you had to be in the hospital at least 7 days or more. If you were there for like 3 days or 4 or 5, it didn't matter. It had to be 7 days or more. Now, at the time, because of the severity of my crisis, I was in the hospital more than 3 times a year. And each time it was definitely more than a week to 2 weeks that I was there. Sometimes I was there for a month and a half. And when I was really unlucky, then I would be there for about 2 months. The other requirements were also the severity of the crisis. Did you have to get any blood transfusions in the past? And this one, it actually was very important because how many blood transfusions did you have was the next question they would ask me. Now, for me, I had a unfortunate incident that happened to me back home. I received a blood transfusion one time before, but unfortunately, I think they did not match the blood type. And so my body totally rejected it. I actually ended up, like seeing all of the blood coming out of me when I went to the bathroom. The other thing that they also required was that what were the medications and treatments you received all those years that you had sickle cell. So for me, we tried multiple different medications. I even tried hydroxyurea. And for some of you that know hydroxyurea, it tends to make a big difference in people with sickle cell. Some people didn't even have pain crisis after that, or their pain crisis was lesser and lesser, and it was not full blown like mine was. For me, hydroxyurea unfortunately did not work. Now, I believe that for me, it was because I had so many years. It was about 16 years in West Africa, Senegal. By the way, welcome to my Senegalese people, Nangandef. So because of that, I think that my body didn't have the treatments, that I needed from a child compared to the people born here in the US that had the treatments, medications, everything that they needed to support them with their sickle cell. So for me, I didn't have any of those, unfortunately. So how was the bone marrow transplant done for me? So before I started the bone marrow transplant, of course, there were the blood types that we did with my brother to make sure he was a match, to make sure that once I received his bone marrow transplant, that my body did not reject it. Because, there was the other bone marrow transplants I also heard, it was riskier at the time, and you were at a higher chance of getting your bone marrow transplant rejected after you've had it. So for me, they removed about 2 to 3 liters of my own blood, right? The sickle cell blood. So they removed that, replaced it with 2 to 3 liters of blood from someone that does not have sickle cell. So that was replaced, right? Then after that, I had about 7 days of chemotherapy. Then I had 1 day of total body radiation, just like they treat cancer. And then on the 8th, I believe, or 9th day, they had the bone marrow transplant. So this was the day where we had a bag, which you'll see in this picture here. This is what it looked like. This was from my brother's bone marrow transplant, and it was infused through me via IV. So it wasn't as painful as other people said. The only painful process I would say throughout the whole thing was the side effects of the chemotherapy. And then the side effect of the bone marrow transplant, which we'll cover in a few. So once I received the bone marrow transplant, then I had another 2 days of chemotherapy to make sure that my body did not reject this new bone marrow that I received from my brother. There were people, they had studies done on those people, and they saw that their bone marrow transplant rejected. So they decided to add those 2 extra days of chemotherapy on the type of bone marrow transplant that I had to reduce the chance of getting a rejection. So, what were the complications that I had after the bone marrow transplant? Now, everybody in the study that I was involved had different side effects. The side effect that I had graft versus host disease. This is when the donor's immune cell actually is attacking my own tissues. So it caused inflammation and damage to some of my tissue. In my own case, it was in my stomach. Like my stomach was, inflamed. It was big. It took about a few weeks before we actually noticed that it was the graft versus host disease, only because it took about like a couple of months before it showed up for me. So with that, I received some steroids to reduce the inflammation, but then I also ended up having shingles. Yes, shingles. It was treated with antiviral medications for me and pain medicine. So to be honest, with everything that I had to go through with sickle cell, I was okay with those types of side effects that I had from the bone marrow transplant. I mean, who else wouldn't be? Now, let's talk about how long was I in the hospital for the whole bone marrow transplant, right? So everybody, again, had different stages and different days, that they were in the hospital for. Now, there was a time that I was neutropenic, and that meant that my blood counts, everything was out of whack. Like, it was so low, and I was so prone to infections that I had to be on isolation. And at the time, nobody under 12 years old could come see me. If you had a small sniffle or cough, you couldn't come see me, because if I got that, then that right there could have been detrimental and deadly to me. And all of the visitors that I had, they had to put head covers, they had to put a gown, they had to put gloves, they had to put a mask on, they had to cover their shoes. So overall, because of the complications also that I had to be in and out. Like the first, I remember 2 to 3 months, I was actually in the hospital the whole time. And then there was one day that I actually had a free day, and this picture right here was my free day. So my mom and I, we went on a date. I love sushi, so I went out to, I couldn't eat sushi because of the transplant. So I still went to a sushi restaurant, and I got me like a beef fried rice, I believe, and some soup. But I enjoyed that, being in the hospital for all of those like weeks I couldn't get out, that I had at least one free day. Because of the graft versus host disease that I ended up being in the hospital for another 2.5 months at the time. The steroids, it took a while for it to work. I was not able to eat. Now, again, because of the chemo, then I had this thing going on in my stomach. There was a couple of weeks that I could not eat, and I had to leave off of Ensure. Yeah, I lived off of Ensure for a few. How long until I noticed that I was pain free. Now, this question, every time I think about it, sometimes it gets me a little bit emotional because it was about 18 months later that I decided, at this time I was home and I was recovering, and I had to like get back all of the vaccinations that you get from when you were a baby, because now your immune system is all brand new again. So you got to get all those vaccines back. So I'm taking a walk in my neighborhood at the time, and there was this beautiful garden that I was sitting in, and I used to just love the scenery. You had fresh air. I mean, it was beautiful. So I went down there, and for the first time, I took a deep breath, and I felt literally the oxygen going through my body. And I was just so amazed because with sickle cell, it felt like somebody was always strangling me, that I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even feel the oxygen properly going into my body. So when I felt that day, I immediately got on the phone and called my mom on the phone and told her, oh my God, guess what happened? Guess what happened? She was freaking out. She was like, oh my God, what's going on? Are you okay? So that's when I told her, yes, I'm okay. But for the first time in 21 years, I'm able to feel what it feels like to actually breathe and have the oxygen going into your body. I know that most of us take it for granted that, when you walk out or when you're just breathing, you don't pay attention to it. But for me, I didn't know that it was so important until that day. So 18 months later, then I was thinking, I was like, wait a minute, when was the last time I had pain? Then I was like, wait, it's been a couple of weeks, so it took a couple of months before the whole sickle cell pain went away. But ever since that day, that's when I started being more conscious about it to see, well, when is the next pain crisis? And I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and no more pain crisis. So God had answered my prayers that I was long praying for since I was like 3 years old. And I was told that I would not live till the age of 18. But again, only God has the last word here. So I thank you guys again for coming into this channel. We'll go more into the other details than on the next video. And if you guys have any questions, don't forget, write it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. And thank you again.